I think one of my only like legitimate complaints, which I guess is not that legitimate, I wish there were more episodes. So I recently stumbled across a show on Netflix called The Principles of Pleasure. I started watching the trailer, as I'm known to do, just to get a little feel for what it's about. And it turns out, everybody should watch this. This is a documentary series about sex and people understanding their bodies better and understanding how other people's bodies work. And I don't want to give too much away because it's in 3 parts and they cover a lot, but it's fantastic. One of the things I wanted to point out about this series in particular is just the way that it's shot and the way that a lot of the information is presented. I think sometimes with subjects like this that are seen as taboo, that you shouldn't talk about, or that potentially make people uncomfortable to talk about because they're seen as very personal, which they certainly are. It can be a little bit tricky to figure out how to present this information so that people actually absorb it and don't just kind of brush it off as like weird or strange or just not something that they want to confront for whatever reason. This show does a really good job of presenting all of that information in a way that sort of makes me think like, yeah, this is probably how it should be taught in schools, even though that's a whole other thing that the show goes into, is just how the education system has seriously failed pretty much everybody when it comes to sex ed. Principles of Pleasure does as good a job as they possibly can to try to right all of the previous wrongs of our history in terms of kind of pushing this subject to the curb. Each episode is pretty much comprised of a combination of interviews with just regular people like you and me, and they talk to doctors, they talk to other experts in the field, and it's all really fascinating. I think my favorite part is the interviews with just the regular people who are talking about a lot of this stuff. It seems like sometimes this is the first time they've ever answered any of these sorts of questions in terms of like, what are they into? What are they not into? What's their past history with certain things? What are they not sure about? All that kind of stuff. And it's really interesting because I think it reflects pretty accurately how most people would answer a lot of these questions. This documentary series is also really good in terms of just the tone in which a lot of this information is presented. It's pretty light tone. Can be funny at times, and on purpose they're trying to keep everything pretty relatable and chill and not make you freak out about who you might feel like you are, or who you are worried that you might become. I don't know, that sort of stuff. But it's all presented in a way that I think makes this sort of subject as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. I will say one area that I found kind of strange as the 3 episodes went along was that there were points where it sort of felt like they weren't sure if they were making this series to specifically appeal to women or to appeal to everyone, just like across the spectrum. And I think that was kind of weird because at points it felt a little, I don't know if divisive is the right word, but just not as inclusive as other parts of it did. So it almost felt like there was a sort of thing where they started out with one idea and then kind of tweaked it as they were going along, which is cool because I think the way that it came out is really good. There were just points that I sort of noticed, like, this kind of feels like it's now being like, they're like excluding certain people from this conversation, when in reality, this is just like a global conversation. As humans, this is something that just should be talked about. And for the most part, I think they did a really good job of including pretty much everybody they possibly could so that everyone who watches this feels pretty well represented. I think that's one of the other things that crossed my mind as I was watching this show was, who is the audience? Because I think in a perfect world, it's everyone. But I think there are a lot of people and just a lot of different cultures that would not welcome a show like this, or a lot of religions that would not welcome a show like this. And that kind of makes me sad because this information is totally normal and it's information that everybody should have access to. I just worry that the right people are not going to see this. I think that that's kind of a broad statement, right? Because it's like there are plenty of people who are going to watch this who are going to learn a lot about themselves and just how things work in general. I think I definitely learned some things about myself when I watched this, but I worry that on a broader scale, enough people who should watch this are not going to, which is kind of a bummer. I don't know. Netflix is sort of all over the place in terms of how they present or like promote these sorts of shows and movies on their service. So hopefully they keep promoting it, because it should definitely be watched. It is worth noting that towards the end of the third and final episode of this show, trigger warning, because they do talk about sexual assault and abuse, situations like that. Some of the people they interview just, sort of briefly discuss kind of what they have gone through, and it's a subject that's covered, not for too long, maybe about 5 or 10 minutes. It's really well handled, the way that they discuss it and talk to the people, the way that they interview the people that they have. But just a warning, because, it can trigger a lot of stuff if it's something that you've dealt with. That being said, I really enjoyed just how raw and honest this whole documentary was, the way they presented all the information they had, the way that all the different experts they interviewed presented everything, and it was all done really well. I think one of my only legitimate complaints, which I guess is not that legitimate, I wish there were more episodes. This feels 100% like something that may have started out as a small project, and then when the 3 episodes were over and it's promoted as a limited series, I was just like, this should get multiple seasons. I wish they'd done 10 episodes and that they had another season. Feels like there's so much to cover, specifically the way that they are covering it, which I think is one of the most effective ways I've seen, or that I've found in a very long time. And I wish there were more. I don't know if there will be, but Netflix, if you're listening, if you somehow, some intern found this video, get these people back on the phone and please have them make more content like this.